Chicago had the kind of winter night that got into bone and metal alike. Wind rolled off Lake Michigan and wrapped itself around Lakeview General Hospital, pressing against the glass doors, whining low in the seams. Inside, the fluorescent lights made everything look a little too pale. The smell of antiseptic clung to the air, threaded with stale coffee and old fear. The sirens cut through it. A paramedic shoved the ER doors open with his shoulder snow melting into dirty water on the floor. The gurney he guided in was red from end to end. Plastic crinkled under the weight of the man on it. The sheet over his chest was soaked more black than red in the hospital light. Male 30s, the medic shouted. Logan Price, Navy, 20-plus gunshot wounds, lost pulse twice en route. The nurses converged, sneakers squeaking on linoleum gloves snapping tight. Someone dragged the crash cart closer. Someone else tried to clear a path through bodies and noise and metal. Monitors clicked on. Sticky pads were pressed to skin. Numbers blinked to life, then fell flat. No pulse, an intern said, voice a little too high. At the far side of the bay, Riley Morgan was already moving. She did not run. She did not hurry. She walked with the small, precise steps of someone who knew that panic wasted air. Her scrub top was a muted blue darker where older stains had resisted bleach. Her hair was twisted into a low knot at the nape of her neck. A small silver ring hung on a chain under her collar, pressing against her skin each time she breathed. She did not look at the ring. She looked at the man on the table. Up close, Logan looked less like a Navy poster and more like a ruined map. Entry wounds puckered along his rib, shoulder, thigh. Some edges were clean and recent. Others had the shiny, half-healed look of old trouble. His skin was gray under the harsh lights. A faint smell of burned fabric and powder clung to him wrong in a place that usually only smelled of bleach. "Where's Dr. Blake?" someone called. On his way came the answer from the hallway. The monitor at Logan's head showed a flat green line. No rhythm, no heartbeat. Just a soft, endless tone that made the air feel thinner. "Time of death," one of the residents began. "Not yet," Riley said. It came out quiet, but the room caught it. Heads turned. The resident hesitated, pen hovering above the chart. Dr. Jonah Blake pushed through the double doors, then mask hanging around his neck hair, damp with sweat from another trauma bay. He took one look at the flat line, the wounds, the pooling blood. "We are not salvaging this," he said. "He took 20 rounds. Step back, Morgan. Call it." Riley did not move. Her gloved hands rested on the edge of the table. Up close, the thin white lines of old scars traced along her wrists, almost hidden by the latex. Her eyes moved fast over Logan's body, taking in Engel's depth color, entry, exit, pattern. She spoke without looking up. "If you open his chest right now, you will never get it closed. He is hypovolemic and his coags are shot. You cut blind, he bleeds out on the floor." Blake narrowed his eyes. "That a textbook you read or a fortune cookie?" Riley finally looked at him. His pressure crashed too fast on the way in. "That is not just blood loss. It is collapse." "Let me buy you a minute." "We do not have a minute," Blake snapped. The monitor's tone sharpened as if joining the argument. A nurse reached for the defibrillator paddles. "Charging," she said. "Wait," Riley said. Blake started to protest, but Riley had already moved. She stepped closer, setting 2 fingers along the spaces between Logan's ribs, just left of center, not where they teach chest compressions. Her touch was firm, measured, like someone finding a pulse in the dark where none should be. "You planning to rub the bullets out of him?" Blake asked. "Quiet," Riley said. The word should have sounded insubordinate. It came out like a simple request. The chaos of the room faded a notch. Voices dropped. For a few seconds, all anyone could hear was the wind hitting the glass doors out front. The hiss of oxygen, the single unwavering tone of the flatline. Riley's jaw tightened. Her fingers adjusted, pressing a fraction deeper, angling in toward a point only she knew. Her eyes were somewhere else for half a heartbeat. Sand, heat, another body, another table that was not a table. The memory flickered and died. On the monitor, the line trembled. A tiny spike, then another. The tone broke into stuttering beeps. Thin at first, then steadier. "He is back," one of the nurses whispered. Blake stared between the screen and Riley's hand. "What did you do?" Riley did not answer that. Her gaze jumped to the bag of fluids hanging overhead, the rate, the color of the blood trailing down the tubing. "Wide bore both arms," she said. "Push warm fluids, get the blood bank on the line, and hang O negative. Now. Start one of those tranexamic vials you never touch unless you are scared." Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of command that did not belong to a first-year nurse. Blake hesitated only a breath before snapping into motion. "You heard her," he said. "Move." The next minutes blurred into a tight sequence that felt both frantic and coldly exact. Gauze soaked through and was replaced. Clamps found vessels before they disappeared. Scissors flashed. Someone cursed when a glove tore. The air thickened with the metallic smell of blood and the acrid sting of cautery. Riley's hands kept moving. She anticipated angles passing instruments before Blake asked for them. When a small bleeder opened near Logan's side, she had the pressure applied and the field cleared almost before the resident saw it. Logan's blood pressure crept up, then down, then slowly, steadily up again. "Next ambulance in 5, a voice called from the hall. They did not look up. The second gurney slammed into the next bay, then a third. Sirens came and went, muffled by the walls. Somewhere a child cried. Somewhere else someone shouted in Spanish and someone else replied in Tagalog. Lakeview General took it all in. By 10 that night, Riley had lost track of how many times she had stripped off bloody gloves and pulled on new ones. Her shoulders ached. The small of her back burned. She tasted metal behind her teeth, even though she had not been the one bleeding. A teenage boy with a stab wound to the abdomen left her bay alive. A woman in her 50s, chest pain and a history of bad decisions about salt, left with a stent and a warning. A bus driver with a crushed arm left swearing he would be back at work in a week. 9 times that night someone had arrived with the odds leaning hard in the wrong direction. 9 times they were still breathing when the sun thought about coming up. Near 4 in the morning the ER finally sagged. The lights did not change, but the energy did. The volume dropped, leaving only the hum of the ventilation and the quiet beeps of monitors keeping count of other people's hearts. In Trauma 2, Logan Price lay under a clean blanket. The worst of his wounds were bound and packed. Tubes snaked from his arms and chest. Bruises were blooming under his skin like slow, dark flowers. The monitor at his bedside showed a jagged, steady line, 82 beats per minute, stronger than before. Riley sat in the plastic chair next to him, elbows on her knees, gloves off at last. Her bare hands were pale where the latex had been, knuckles reddened, nails cut down to nothing. The faint scars at her wrists caught the light. She watched the screen, listened to the rhythm. The beeps were soft, but after a night like this, they sounded almost loud. "Stay with it," she murmured. She did not know if she meant him or herself. Outside the small window of the bay, the city was beginning to pale at the edges. Snow flurries drifted across the glass. Her reflection shifted there, layered over the vague shapes of buildings and streetlights. A face too tired for her age, eyes that held on a fraction too long. The monitor kept time. Riley leaned back in the chair, letting her head tip against the wall for just a moment, listening, letting that sound fill the space inside her chest where silence used to live. The night was not over, not really. In a place like this, it never was. By 9 in the morning, the hospital did not look like it had been a battlefield. Floors were mopped, trash bags tied and hauled away, the smell of bleach, a little sharper to cover what had been there a few hours before. The only proof of the night was in the faces of the staff, eyes a shade duller, shoulders a little lower, movement slower when no one was watching. In the break room, a television bolted to the wall threw blue light across the faded couches and the microwave that never quite smelled clean. Someone had turned the volume up. A news anchor smiled too much for the subject. An overnight miracle at Lakeview General in Chicago. A first-year emergency nurse is being hailed as a hero after saving 9 critical patients in a single shift, including a decorated Navy SEAL who arrived with more than 20 gunshot wounds. Phone videos taken from the waiting room showed flashes of the ER doors, glimpses of scrubs and blood. A still photo pulled from some staff member's social media showed Riley half turned away from the camera, hair pulled back, eyes focused past the frame. "She looks exhausted," a nurse muttered, dumping powdered creamer into her coffee. "I thought hero shots had better lighting." Another nurse laughed, tired and quick. Riley reached past them to refill her own mug. Her coffee had gone cold somewhere around 3 in the morning, and she had not noticed until now. She kept her eyes on the counter, not on the screen. Riley, the charge nurse, called from the doorway, a grin tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You are famous." Riley took a sip before answering. "Famous people sleep," she said. "Can I clock out now, or does fame not cover that?" "You could at least look," the charge nurse said, jerking her chin toward the television. Riley glanced up just long enough to see her own blurred face framed by a headline that read, "Miracle Nurse." For a second, the image overlapped with another in her mind, a different camera. A different desert, a photo of a squad lined up in the sun, smiling because someone had told them to. She lowered her gaze. "I saw it," she said. "He is still alive. That is the only part that matters." The charge nurse's smile faded into something softer. "Go home, Morgan, before they send a camera crew in here." Riley nodded, finished the coffee, and dropped the empty cup in the trash. As she stepped into the hallway, she could feel eyes on her staff glancing up from charts from computer screens. Some of the looks were admiration. Some were curiosity. All of them felt like a weight. Outside, the cold hit her like a clean sheet. The sky over Chicago was a flat gray slate. Cars hissed past on wet asphalt. She pulled her coat tighter and crossed to the bus stop, ignoring the reporters gathered closer to the main entrance. Someone shouted, asking if she could answer a few questions. She did not slow down. Her apartment sat on the third floor of a brick building that had seen better decades. The hallway smelled of boiled vegetables and someone's cheap cologne. Inside her unit, it was quiet in a way the hospital never was. She dropped her bag on the small table by the door. The ring on the chain under her shirt had left a shallow imprint on her skin. She unhooked the clasp and let the chain slide free, catching the ring in her palm. It was gold plain, the edge warped and blackened on one side, as if it had been too close to something very hot at the wrong time. She held it between thumb and forefinger, watching it catch the light from the narrow window over the sink. On the top shelf of the closet sat a wooden box. She had to stand on her toes to reach it. The lid creaked when she opened it. Inside lay a folded American flag, edges, crisp colors muted. Next to it, a dog tag on a thin chain, the letters stamped deep enough to last longer than memory. Hayes Ethan J. She ran her thumb along his name once, twice. The metal was cold and familiar. "You would hate this," she said softly. "Cameras, headlines, all of it." The room did not answer. Her phone vibrated on the counter screen, lighting with an unknown number. No name. Just 10 digits in a city she did not recognize. She watched it buzz until the screen went dark. At Lakeview, the reporters finally gave up on catching the nurse in the parking lot and switched to filming the front of the building. They caught, without realizing it, 2 people who were not staff walking in through the main entrance. They wore dark suits that looked too sharp for a place like this. The man's tie was slightly crooked, like he had not noticed. The woman's hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, her expression unreadable. Agent Mark Reyes flashed his ID at the security desk. The guard looked it over and buzzed them through. "FBI at a hospital," the guard said. "Never a good sign." Reyes gave a thin, polite smile. "Depends who you ask." His partner, Tessa Cho, scanned the lobby with quick, assessing eyes. Her gaze paused on the television, showing the same news clip from that morning. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "She does not look like much," Cho said. "Most of the dangerous people I have met do not," Reyes replied. They spoke with the hospital administrator first, in an office decorated with generic landscapes and a shelf of awards. The administrator replayed the night in clinical phrases, mass influx level 1 trauma resource allocation, until Cho interrupted. "And the nurse," she said, "Riley Morgan." The administrator adjusted his glasses. "Riley is one of our newer hires. Very competent, quiet, no issues on her record. Last night she just stepped up." "Does she usually override trauma surgeons?" Cho asked. The administrator hesitated. "I would not characterize it that way." "But she did," Cho said. Reyes leaned forward. "Who else was on with her?" Names were exchanged. They were handed a list of staff copies of shift logs. Still, every road came back to the same point. The nurse with a short file and a longer trail of whispers. They found Riley in an empty hallway near the medication room. She had showered and changed back into regular clothes, jeans, and a dark sweater, hair damp and curling a little at the ends. She looked like someone who could have been shopping for groceries or tutoring students or doing any number of things that did not include pulling people back from death. "Ms. Morgan," Reyes said. She turned eyes flicking to their badges, then to their faces. "You found the wrong nurse," she said. "I am off shift." "That is exactly the nurse we are looking for," Cho said. They stepped into a small conference room at the end of the hall. The table was scarred from years of elbows and coffee cups. A whiteboard on the wall still held half-erased vitals from a long-forgotten teaching session. Reyes set a small recorder on the table and pushed the button. "For the record," he said, "can you state your name and position here at Lakeview General?" "Riley Morgan," she said. "Registered nurse, emergency department." "You were on duty last night during the incident involving Petty Officer Logan Price," he said. "I was in the room," she answered. Cho raised an eyebrow. "Reports say you did a little more than stand in the room." Riley's hands rested on the table, fingers laced. There was a faint redness where gloves had sat for too many hours. "We worked as a team," she said. "Dr. Blake led the case." Reyes flipped through a file. "Multiple witnesses report that you instructed Dr. Blake to delay opening the chest, that you performed an unorthodox manual maneuver that preceded the return of cardiac rhythm, that you directed specific blood products and doses without formal orders." Riley met his gaze. "He was dying," she said. "We did what needed to be done." "How did you know what would work?" Cho asked. "You were not guessing." Riley paused, then looked down at her hands. "I have seen a lot of bleeding," she said. "You start to recognize patterns." Where Reyes asked quietly, "Where have you seen that?" Her jaw tightened. The muscles in her cheek twitched once. "Overseas," she said. "Volunteer clinics, bad neighborhoods, it runs together." Cho tapped the folder with one finger. "There is nothing in your file about work overseas. No foreign addresses, no visas, no tax records before Chicago. You just appear Ms. Morgan, from nowhere." Riley's mouth curved, but it was not a smile. "Maybe I'm just good at paperwork," she said. Reyes studied her face, the steady eyes, the way she controlled her breathing. It reminded him of the way some soldiers sat in interview rooms present but a step back in their own heads. He clicked the recorder off. If we have more questions, he said, we will be in touch. I work nights, she said. You know where to look. In the ICU, Logan Price woke to the sound of his own heart arguing with the monitor. His throat felt like broken glass. Every breath sent a complaint through the stitched lines in his chest and side. A nurse adjusted his oxygen. Not Riley. Someone he did not know. He tried to speak and coughed instead. Take it easy, the nurse said. I will get your doctor. Footsteps later, Riley stepped into the room. She checked the drip rates, the reading on the ventilator, the numbers on the screen. She did not look at his face until he forced the word out. You, he said. His voice was rough and almost soundless. She moved closer. You should not be talking, she said. Your lungs have opinions about that. He watched her hands as she worked. They moved fast and precise, never fumbling, always in the right place. I know those hands, he whispered. Did not think I would see them again in a place with clean walls. She went still for a fraction of a second. You were not the only person shot in this city, she said. You are not that special. He swallowed, eyes narrowing a little. This is not my first hole in the chest, he said. Last time the medic called me back the same way. 2 fingers, same spot, same look on her face when the monitor woke up. Riley taped down a line that did not need taping. You should rest, she said. He tried to smile and winced. Sergeant, he murmured more to himself than to her. Her eyes flicked to his sharp, then away. I am your nurse, she said. That is all. She left the room with her steps measured, but her pulse did not match her pace. That evening, Reyes sat alone in his office, the light from his computer screen the only bright thing in the room. The file on his desk was thin, a single manila folder that did not fit what he had seen. He typed Riley Morgan into the federal databases again. The same records came up. Nursing license, hire date at Lakeview, an apartment lease, nothing before that. He leaned back, rubbed his eyes, then tried something else. Different searches, variations on her name. Morgan Riley, R. Morgan, R.M. Nothing that mattered. He stared at her ID photo for a long second. Then he opened a restricted military index and typed a different name. R. Hayes. The system thought, then produced a single match. Hayes Riley, A. Sergeant, United States Army Medical Department. Status deceased. Date of death 2011, Theater, Iraq. Reyes exhaled a slow breath that felt heavier than it should. On the screen, the word stayed where it was black and simple. Deceased. The word stayed on Reyes's screen longer than it needed to. Deceased. The office around him hummed with the low sounds of phones and printers and people pretending they were not listening to one another. Outside the narrow window, Chicago was a smear of gray and steel. He printed the record. It came out thin. Name, rank, branch, a date. A line that said cause of death pending. Most of the rest was black ink where other words should have been. The door opened without a knock. Cho stepped in, a paper cup of coffee in one hand, eyebrows already raised. You look like you found a ghost, she said. He slid the page across the desk. I did, he said. Sergeant Riley A. Hayes, Army medic, dead for 14 years, same face, same eyes. She read it, lips pressing into a flat line. Could be a relative, she said. Sister, cousin. He clicked a few keys and pulled up a grainy photograph from the file. A woman in desert fatigue squinting into bright light helmet tucked under her arm. Sand in the air. A man beside her arm over her shoulder grinning. The camera had caught her in the half-second before a smile fully formed. He set it beside Riley's hospital ID. Cho did not say anything for a moment. So, our miracle nurse came back from the dead, she said. Or someone buried her twice on paper. Either way, that is not nothing. Reyes opened another screen. A program name sat at the top of a heavily redacted document. Tactical Revival Unit, under it a few unmarked lines. Field deployment, stabilization protocols, human asset retention. No public record, he said. Only tucked into an archive that looks like it never learned the word oversight. Cho stared at the title. Revival, she said. Funny word given the circumstances. He shut the laptop. We need to talk to Price again. Logan was awake when they came in, eyes clearer now, pain dulled by medication. The room smelled like plastic and whatever they used to wipe down bed rails. The monitor tracked his heart with steady ticks, a little slower than before, like it was remembering how to rest. You again, he said when he saw Reyes. You brought a friend this time. Cho nodded once. Agent Cho, she said. We have some follow-up question. Sure, Logan said. I'm not going anywhere. Reyes pulled a chair closer. You told me earlier, he said, that we were asking the wrong question, that we should care more about who trained her than what she did last night. Logan looked past him at the ceiling, at the tiny cracks in the paint. Yeah, he said. Ever heard of a unit called Taryu? Reyes asked. Tactical Revival Unit. Logan's jaw tightened. I figured that file would be buried deeper, he said. So it exists, Cho said. It existed, Logan corrected. On paper, at least. Medics with special rules. Keep people alive when the odds are already done. Long enough to pull coordinates out of them or confirm codes. You know, useful stuff. He spoke around the words like they tasted bad. Reyes watched his face. You worked with them, he said. No, Logan said. They worked near us. We called them in when things went sideways. You would be surprised how many times Command decided one more hour of breathing was worth the price of a chopper ride. Cho crossed her arms. And Riley, she said. Sergeant Hayes, she was one of them. Logan hesitated, then gave a small nod. Desert years back, he said. I caught a piece of metal through the side, thought that was it. She shoved her hand between my ribs and called me a lot of names and told me to quit dying on her. Sound familiar? The memory flickered in his eyes, mixing with fluorescent light. She looked different, he continued. More weight on her, hair hidden. Same hands, though. You do not forget hands like that. Why would someone like that end up here? Reyes asked. New name, civilian job, no history. Because someone told her she could stop lining up bodies and start fixing people who would see their kids again, Logan said, voice low. Or because someone needed her to disappear. Hard to say which came first. Cho stepped closer to the bed. When you were ambushed, she said, did you see them, the shooters? Not enough to hand you a sketch, Logan said. They were clean, no patches. Movement like they had done this before. Not Northside idiots with stolen guns. Private Reyes said. Logan nodded. Contractor smooth, he said. No flag, no name, good rifles, better timing. Reyes thought of the program name again. Tactical Revival Unit, Human Asset Retention. If someone wanted you dead, he said, and they knew Ticharu had a medic who could do what she does, they would not expect you to make it to a hospital. Exactly, Logan said. They thought the math was done. 20 rounds in a parking garage. No way I crawl out of that. Then I do, and she is standing over me with those hands. The monitor kept ticking louder in the quiet. So now you have two problems, Agent Logan said. Who put those guns on me and who still thinks they own her? Riley stood at the end of a hallway back at Lakeview, watching the city through a narrow pane of glass. The late afternoon light made the snow look dirtier than it was. Tire tracks had cut dark lines through slush. People moved down the sidewalk in bundled shapes. Her reflection floated over it all. Dark sweater hair pulled back, badge clipped at her waist. Ordinary lines around her eyes. You are still here, the charge nurse said from behind her. I thought you went home hours ago. Paperwork, Riley said. I lost a consent form. It was hiding. The charge nurse shook her head. You need sleep, she said. Miracle status revoked if you start falling over. Riley smiled a small thing. Miracles are above my pay grade, she said. The nurse left her. Riley stayed by the glass, letting her eyes unfocus until the street turned into color and movement without detail. The rhythm of her own heartbeat settled against the faint echo of monitors from down the hall. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. She almost let it ring out the way she had that morning. Instead, for reasons she did not bother to name, she answered. Nurse Morgan, she said. That is not what they used to call you, a man's voice replied. The accent was American, but there was dust in it, the lingering rasp of someone who had yelled over helicopters more than once. Riley did not speak, the silence stretched. You did good last night, the voice said. I saw the footage. I did not think you still had it in you. You have the wrong number, she said. You do not hang up on me, he said. You owe me that much. She could see in the glass the way her own hand tightened around the phone. What do you want? She asked. To remind you that you were declared dead for a reason, he said. The people who signed that line did not do it out of the kindness of their hearts. They did it to close a door. And yet here you are, she said, standing on the doorstep. You chose to show your hand, he said. You put your fingers in a man's chest on camera. You gave the Bureau a miracle. That gets attention. From who, she asked. A small laugh came through the line, humorless. From everyone, he said. From the suits who lost their favorite program. From the company men who picked up what was left. From anyone who remembers that TRU did not just vanish. She swallowed. Are you with them, she asked. With the company. I'm telling you to keep your head down, he said. You survived twice. Do not test the odds. I have patients to treat, she said. I do not have time for ghosts. Ghosts have time for you, he said. Especially when they think you know where the bodies are buried. The line clicked dead. She stared at her reflection, the phone still against her ear, until the buzz of a passing stretcher broke the spell. A transport tech apologized as he nudged by. The moment dissolved back into fluorescent light and scuffed floor. That night, the snow turned to rain, tapping against the apartment windows like impatient fingers. Riley sat at the small table under the kitchen light, the wooden box open in front of her. The flag stayed folded. The dog tag lay in the lid, catching the yellow light. She had emptied the rest. The ring sat beside a folded photograph. Ethan in desert brown sun behind him grinned crooked. her own face at the edge of the frame, half cut off, hand raised as if she had been about to block the shot. Next to it lay a laminated sliver of map. Not Iraq, Chicago. Industrial blocks near the river. Someone had marked a few intersections in faint red ink years ago. Old supply routes, storage spaces that did not ask questions. Her phone was in the middle of the table. The call log still showed the unknown number. Below that, a single contact without a real name. Just 3 letters. CHF. She had not dialed that number in a long time. It was a lifeline she had promised herself she would never pull again. Her thumb hovered over it. Outside, a train rattled along the elevated tracks, windows lit, carrying strangers past. The sound vibrated faintly in the glass and in her chest. She set the phone down without calling. Her pulse had picked up that same restless drum it found whenever the ground shifted under her feet. In the quiet, the question did not need words. How long could she sit here pretending the world had not already found her twice? She closed the box, slid it back onto the shelf, and stood there a moment longer, fingers pressed against the wood. She was out of room to pretend that she was only what her badge said she was. Rain rolled in on the 3rd night. It came hard and straight, washing the last dirty snow from the gutters and turning the city into a blur of reflections. Streetlights smeared across wet pavement. The tracks of the elevated train shone dull silver when the cars rattled past above. In his office, Reyes stared at the email on his screen. The subject line was bland. Case coordination update. The body was worse. Effective immediately, all investigative material related to Incident 47B, including but not limited to staff interviews and classified program references, is to be forwarded to Federal Defense Liaison. No further action is authorized at the field level. Do not pursue ancillary leads without written clearance. Cho leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. Let me guess, she said. They love your initiative and they want you to keep digging as deep as you can. He turned the monitor so she could see. She read it once, then again slower. So that is it, she said. We spook a few ghosts and they snatch the file back. They do not want us near True, Reyes said, or her. Cho pushed off the door, restless. Defense liaison, she said. Translation, some colonel with a pension to protect. We still have a live witness, you know. 2 if you count the nurse who refuses to stay in her box. Reyes closed the email without replying to it. He felt the weight of the thin printed page in his pocket, the one that said Riley Hayes had died years ago. We still have ears, he said. If something happens, it will echo. Outside, a siren wailed, then cut off. The city kept its own rhythm, indifferent to memos. At Lakeview, Riley finished another shift that felt like 3 stacked together. The cases were less dramatic than the night Logan had come in. Broken bones, shortness of breath, a diabetic crash, the sort of emergencies that stayed inside walls and did not make the news. Her body moved on autopilot, her mind did not. By the time she stepped out of the staff entrance, the rain had soaked through her hood in seconds. Water ran down the back of her neck, clammy against tired skin. She squinted through it, scanning the street the way she always did now, without admitting she was doing it. The hospital lot held the usual scatter of Crespeo. A rideshare idled with its hazards blinking. A security guard smoked near the loading dock, jacket pulled up against the weather. Across the street, half in shadow, sat an SUV with tinted windows. Dark paint beaded with water. No lights on, no engine noise she could hear over the rain. She stared at it too long, enough that if someone was inside, they would know she had seen them. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She did not have to look at the screen to know it would say unknown. You are persistent, she said into the receiver. Occupational hazard, the man's voice replied. We watch the things that are likely to explode. What do you want? She asked. You got a visit from the bureau, he said. You lit up a dead program. You made people dig out old folders. That annoys certain employers. Graybridge, she said, trying the word. He was quiet for a beat. So you do read the fine print, he said. Yes. Graybridge acquired certain assets when TRU went away. Training manuals, techniques, names. Mine, she said. You were supposed to be a closed chapter, he said. Instead, you put on a show in front of a dozen witnesses and a security camera. Contractors talk. Files get pulled. People remember that Sergeant Hayes never really learned how to stay dead. Rain pounded on the asphalt around her. The SUV sat silent, wipers still. You work for them, she said. Nah, I work for whoever signs the check, he said. I am calling because some of us still remember what you did over there that was not about intel. The favors you pulled, the lives you scraped out of the sand. I'm telling you that the kind of people who buy programs do not like wild variables. Then tell them to stop aiming guns at my patients, she said. That gunfight in the parking garage, he said. That was not theirs. That was someone else's problem. But you are everyone's problem if you start opening your mouth. I have not said a word, she said. You exist, he said. Sometimes that is enough. The line clicked off. She stood there a moment longer in the rainwater running down her face, mixing with the warmth creeping up her throat. The SUV finally pulled away from the curb, turning the corner without signaling. Back at the apartment, she peeled out of wet clothes and stood a long time under water that refused to get quite hot enough. Steam fogged the mirror. She wiped a circle clear and watched herself look back. Drops clung to her eyelashes. The skin under her eyes had a permanent smudge of fatigue now. She dressed, then dragged the wooden box from the closet, again setting it on the table. The flag stayed where it was folded into its precise triangle. She set the dog tag beside it, the ring next to that. She reached under the false bottom of the box, this time fingers finding the taped edge by feel. The thin metal drive that came free was the size of her thumb, heavier than it looked. She had taken it on the last day before her name turned into a line in a casualty report. Back then it had felt like insurance. For years in Chicago it had been a weight she pretended she did not feel. She laid it next to the map she had unfolded earlier. The industrial blocks near the river stared back, printed in faded ink. Circles marked a few intersections. Old supply depots, temporary clinics, storage facilities that did not show up on public registries. One of them had a smudge of dirt pressed into the paper, the outline of a fingerprint that might have been hers or Ethan's. The ink had run a little there, like rain had touched it once. She touched that spot, then picked up the drive and closed her hand around it. The train rushed by outside close enough that the walls vibrated for a second. Metal on metal. A low, familiar rumble. She put on her coat, slipped the drive into her pocket, and killed the lights. The building near the river used to be some kind of distribution hub. That was what the sign had said once. The letters were gone now, only rust stains left behind. The loading bays were chained, the windows broken or boarded. Weeds pushed up through cracks in the asphalt. Inside, the air was colder than it was outside. Concrete held on to chill. Her footsteps echoed as she walked through the main floor flashlight beam, catching on dust and old pallets. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. At the back, where the main warehouse space narrowed into a smaller annex, she found the room she remembered. The heavy door stuck, then gave groaning like it had opinions about being opened again. There were still metal shelves bolted to the walls, most of them empty. A few cardboard boxes slumped in one corner, warped from damp. She stood for a while in the doorway listening. Nothing but water-distant traffic and her own breath. She moved through the space, checking exits. One main door, a smaller one leading out to an alley. High windows held together by old wire mesh. No cameras she could see. The room had terrible lighting, bad line of sight, and only 2 ways out. For what she had in mind, that counted as good. She pulled a battered first aid kit from her bag and set it on one of the shelves. Inside were not just bandages and antiseptic. Small glass vials, coiled lengths of tape, a roll of cord. Her hands worked fast, setting simple obstacles. A crate angled here to trip a careless stride. A length of cord tied low between 2 shelves. A loose board near the back, wedged to groan loudly if stepped on. It was not much, it was something. Footsteps approached from the main hall. Light shoes, not heavy boots. The rhythm was wrong for someone hunting. Riley turned ready to move when a familiar voice floated in. "Place has good acoustics," Logan said. "You planning choir practice?" He appeared in the doorway, pale under the overhead fluorescence, a hospital jacket thrown over his clothes. His right arm was still in a sling. He looked like he had no business outside of a bed. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I discharged myself," he said. "The forms did not agree, but I am persuasive." "You should be on a monitor," she said. "I am tired of machines telling me I am alive," he said. "Figured I would check for myself." He looked around, taking in the empty shelves, the traps, the careful positioning. "You expecting company?" he asked. "Graybridge has been watching the hospital," she said. "The Bureau has orders to stand down. This place is off all their maps. That makes it valuable real estate." "For an ambush," he said. "For a conversation," she said. "If they come for me, I would rather it be here than near a pediatric wing." He studied her face. "You could still disappear," he said. "Change cities again, change names." She took the drive from her pocket and held it up between 2 fingers. "This is a reason," she said. "Every deployment, every contract, the money trails that kept a TRU alive after the paperwork said it was over. If I walk away now, they keep buying people like you and selling people like me." He whistled low. "You always hoard souvenirs like that?" he asked. "I thought I was keeping it for Ethan," she said. "For some day when I could afford to be angry on paper. Turns out I was stalling." She pressed the drive into his good hand. "I need you to get that to Agent Reyes," she said. "He is the kind who reads instead of shredding." "You are assuming I trust the Bureau," he said. "You trust me," she said. He gave a short nod. "That is the problem," he said. "It makes me agree to stupid plan." The sound of an engine grew outside, low and steady. Not a car idling. Bigger. Riley's spine tightened. Back door, she said. Out into the alley, then 3 blocks east. Do not come back here. His jaw set. I am not leaving you, he said. You are leaving with the only thing in this building that matters, she said. You cannot run a program if everyone knows where the money slept. Headlights swept through the high windows, throwing their shadows huge on the walls. Doors opened, then closed with muffled thumps. Bootsteps this time, heavy, more than one pair. Graybridge Logan said. You wanted to know what they look like up close, she said. Now you do. Go. He hesitated. She moved closer, set her palm carefully against the uninjured side of his chest, right over his heart. Your job is to walk out of buildings when someone gives you that chance, she said. Mine is to keep the roof from landing on you. He searched her face for a sign of doubt. There was none. He slipped the drive into his pocket and headed for the back door, stepping over the wire she had strung without needing a warning. When he pushed the door open, the night air came in wet and cold. He vanished into it, footsteps swallowed by rain. The main entrance shook as someone hit it from the outside. Riley turned toward the sound shoulders, loosening hands, flexing once. The thin scars along her wrists felt like old lines on a map, guiding her back to a place she thought she had left behind. The first kick took the lock, the second blew the door inward. 4 men came through, moving with the kind of coordinated spread that never showed up in civilian security training. Dark jackets, short hair, eyes scanning, not wandering. Riley Hayes, the one in front, called. His voice did not lift even in the echoing room. Company would like a word. Her hands settled at her sides. The rain outside drummed on the roof, steady as a heart that had chosen its pace. For a second, no one moved. The 4 men stood inside the jagged frame of the door, shoulders loose weight balanced. Rain hissed on the concrete outside a constant curtain behind them. Riley took a slow breath. Graybridge, she said. The one in front tipped his head slightly as if acknowledging a compliment. Contract division, he said. You had a chance to stay a memory sergeant. You chose headlines. Headlines come and go, she said. Paper burns, people stay. Not our kind of people, he said. His hand dipped toward his jacket. She was already moving. The crate she had angled earlier took his shin cleanly. He stumbled, steadied, but the brief hitch opened a gap in the line. She slipped sideways into it, palm slamming into the wrist of the second man as his weapon cleared his coat. The gun skittered across the floor, clattering against the far wall. They were good. Fast. Better than most she had seen in cities. Their reactions were tight, their recovery quick. But they were trained for clean entries, straight lines, rooms that made sense on paper. This room had been tilted by someone who knew what panic did to feet. The third contractor lunged toward her flank and hit the cord strung low between shelves. His forward momentum turned into a sudden drop. His shoulder slammed into metal, rattling the whole unit. Vials in the first aid kit danced. Riley caught the edge of a shelf, swung her weight, and drove her heel into the chest of the first man as he regained his footing. Air left him in a grunt. He crashed back into the fourth, sending them both against the wall. Gunfire would have echoed for blocks. None of them wanted that kind of attention. The fight stayed close, brutal, in the way of people who knew exactly how much force bones could take. A fist caught her ribs. Pain flared through her side, hot and bright. She rode it, used the angle to twist out of a grab and slam her elbow into the side of a throat. The man dropped, coughing and gagging, eyes wide. The leader recovered first. He came in low forearm, aiming for her knee, trying to take her down by simple arithmetic. She sidestepped, but not enough. His weight clipped her, sending her crashing into the shelf. Metal sang. A box fell split open. Gauze and instruments spilled like a small sterile flood. He grabbed for her shoulder. Her hand closed on the nearest thing that was not rust. A syringe. She did not pause to read the tiny print on the label. She slammed it into his thigh through the fabric thumb on the plunger. Whatever was left inside flooded his system, not enough to kill, enough to scramble. His eyes went glassy, his grip loosened. She pushed off him and stumbled back, chest-heaving lungs pulling metal-tasting air. The room spun for a moment, then steadied. 2 of the men were on the floor. One groaned, trying to roll over. The one who had hit the cord lay still, head at an angle that did not belong to the living. The leader was on his knees, hand gripping the shelf to keep from falling. Corporate does not pay you enough, she said. He laughed once hoarse. You think this is about money, he said. You walked away with an entire program's worth of ghosts. There are people who would empty their accounts to keep that buried. Then they will have to dig, she said. His eyes slid out of focus. He toppled sideways, hit the concrete, and did not get up. For a long second, the only sound was rain and her own breathing. Then faintly from outside came another sound. Sirens. Not the wild wail of an ambulance running hot. A steadier rise and fall. Law enforcement. She looked at the bodies on the floor, at the mess she had made, at the traps that had bought her minutes but not safety. There was no time to clean. There was barely time to think. She crossed the room, grabbed her bag, and took the back door into the alley. Rain slapped her face, plastered her hair to her neck. She moved without looking back. By the time Reyes and Cho reached the warehouse district, the rain had softened to a steady drizzle. Patrol cars painted the wet pavement red and blue. Uniformed officers stood in small knots, radios crackling. A copper smell rode the damp air. Reyes ducked under the tape at the entrance. Inside, the space felt hollow, the kind of emptiness that comes after violence rather than age. The first body lay near the door, eyes half open, face slack. A second in the middle of the room, both in civilian clothes that had never been near a sales rack. Their hands were calloused, their boots matched. Not muggers, Cho said softly. A crime scene tech pointed to the far wall. Third one over there, he said, neck snapped. And there is sign of at least one more person bleeding, but no body. Trail stops near the back exit. Reyes looked at the scuffed marks on the concrete, the dragged footprints, the angles of impact. He saw the fight more clearly than if someone had filmed it. She was here, he said. Cho frowned. You do not know that. He stepped around a spill of gauze crouched near the first aid kit. The contents were scattered, but the arrangement was wrong for pure panic. Certain items were missing that no one would bother to steal. Specialized vials, tourniquets, things someone with training would reach for. This was staged, he said. Not their entry, hers. She picked the ground. Cho stared at him. You sound impressed, she said. I sound aware, he said. Logan showed up an hour later against his doctor's advice and common sense. He wore a raincoat over Sweat's hospital wristband still clinging to his arm. The patrol officer at the perimeter tried to turn him away. He asked for Reyes by name. When Reyes stepped out of the building and saw him standing there, damp and stubborn, something like relief and frustration tangled in his chest. You are supposed to be in a bed, Reyes said. I get that a lot, Logan said. We do not always get what we are supposed to. He reached into his coat and pulled out the small metal drive. Even wrapped in a plastic evidence bag, it looked heavy. She said you would know what to do with it, he said. Reyes took the bag carefully. What is on it, he asked. Everything, Logan said. Every op, every contract, every time someone signed off on turning a medic into a timer, or so she says. I am not the one who stole it. Why did she give it to you? Cho asked. Because she needed a delivery system with a limp instead of clearance badges, he said. You were told to stand down, yeah. That memo came from someone who does not want this opened. She is betting you like your job less than you hate secrets. Cho glanced at Reyes. He is very confident, she said. He almost died in a parking garage, Reyes replied. Confidence comes with the territory. Back at the bureau, the drive produced more than he had expected and less than he wanted. File trees unspooled across his screen. Names, dates, contract codes. Shipping manifests for medical aid that made no sense for the places they were supposedly headed. Internal memos that used words like utilization and attrition when they meant people. The program name appeared again and again. Tactical Revival Unit. In some documents it was written out, in others reduced to 3 letters, TRU. There were reference numbers tying TRU to private subsidiaries. One in particular came up more than the others. Graybridge Holdings, Security Consulting, Logistics, Risk Management. Cho read over his shoulder. You could feed this to an oversight committee and still watch them choke on it, she said. It is too neat, too big. We are not feeding anything yet, he said. We start by choking the right people one at a time. He traced the money first. Wire transfers from defense budgets into shell nonprofits. From there into Graybridge contracts. From Graybridge into a string of smaller accounts that paid for things like specialized field training and advanced stabilization research. After 2 days, he had a wall whiteboard crowded with names and arrows. A knot sat in the middle where all the lines converged. Cho tapped one connection with the back of a marker. This address here, she said. Warehouse on the south side, listed as Disaster Relief Depot. Signed off last quarter. Big shipment 2 weeks ago. No outgoing record. He looked at the drive on his desk, at the now familiar codes next to the warehouse's identifier. The same codes that sat in the margins near TRU references. Call it in, he said. No memos, no emails. We do this quiet. The Southside warehouse looked more legitimate than the abandoned one by the river. There was fresh paint near the loading bays. A sign with a charity's name hung over the door. Pallets were stacked neatly inside, wrapped in plastic labels, facing out for inspectors who did not look too closely. Reyes walked down the main aisle reading the printed words. Emergency field kits, sterile bandages, pediatric nutritional support. Pretty, he said, all the right phrases. Cho peeled back the plastic on one of the pallets and opened a box. Inside were trays of syringes packed snug in blue foam. No labels, no dosage information. Kids love unlabeled injectable agents, she said, their favorite. In the back room they found the rest. Rows of metal shelves holding small glass ampules. The liquid inside caught the fluorescent light and turned it into thin rainbows. There were portable monitors stacked too high, their startup screens still flashing old military firmware tags. A folded stretcher stained in a way no bleach could ever fully erase. It smelled of ammonia and something medicinal that made the back of the throat itch. Reyes ran a finger along the edge of a monitor, then stepped back as a voice cut from the shadows. "Careful," it said. "Those have a habit of rewriting whoever leans on them too long." He turned, hand moving toward his sidearm, and saw her. Riley stood between two shelves, hands empty and held slightly away from her body. She wore dark jacket jeans, hair braided back. There was a small cut on her cheekbone, the kind that came from meeting a hard surface at speed and winning narrowly. "You have a talent for showing up in my crime scenes," Reyes said. "You have a talent for following the same threads I do," she said. Cho stepped to one side, not lowering her stance. "You are not supposed to be here," Cho said. Riley's gaze moved over the shelves, the boxes, the carefully arranged lies. "Neither are you," she said. Reyes nodded toward the room. "You knew about this place," he said. "I knew the pattern," she said. "Diffuse the evidence. Make it look like charity. If you label something as help often enough, people stop asking who it is supposed to help." "How long have you known Tiaru stayed alive through these?" he asked. "Long enough to recognize the packing tape," she said. He studied her face. "Why come to us?" he asked. "You could have vanished again. New city, new badge." She looked at her hands, at the faint scars there. "I tried that," she said. "It did not take." Footsteps and voices approached from the main floor. Other agents, the evidence team moving in. For a brief moment, it was just the three of them in the back room, the memory of different battles crowding the air. "Riley Hayes," Reyes said quietly. "That is your name, not Morgan." Her jaw flexed. "It was," she said. Then it became a problem. "Sergeant? You are a material witness in an investigation with more moving parts than I like to count," he said. "You can keep pretending you are just a nurse, or you can help us put this where it belongs." Her eyes met his steady. "You already know enough to be dangerous," she said. "The question is whether you know enough to survive it." Cho capped her pen, the click loud in the small room. "If you want this to mean anything," she said, nodding at the shelves, "someone has to talk where people are legally required to listen." Riley exhaled a long breath that seemed to carry out years. "Then we talk," she said, "on the record." Later, in a conference room with cameras in the corners and a stenographer at the end of the table, she sat across from Reyes and a panel of faces that had been trained into neutrality. Her hair was pulled back, the silver ring hung on its chain hidden under a plain blouse. Her hands rested on the table, fingers interlaced scars, pale lines against the wood. "For the record," Reyes said, "state your full name." "Riley Ann Hayes," she said. "Former Sergeant, United States Army Medical Department, current registered nurse, Lakeview General Hospital." "And your involvement with Tactical Revival Unit?" a man from the panel asked. "I was assigned to True as a field medic," she said. "We were deployed where command decided the normal rules were not fast enough." She spoke without flourish. Dates, places, the stated mission, the real one. How TRU teams would be dropped into situations where someone important was dying too quickly. How the job was to keep them alive just long enough for intelligence officers to finish what they called their work. Sometimes that meant we saved people who would have died. Otherwise, she said, sometimes it meant we made someone live through an hour they should not have had to see. "And your exit from the program?" another asked. Her eyes flickered once, as if catching a light only she could see. "My unit hit an IED," she said. "Our convoy was ambushed. My husband pulled me out of the blast radius and took the second hit meant for both of us. Command decided my death would be more convenient than my testimony. I signed what they put in front of me and stayed dead." Silence settled over the table. Even the stenographer looked up for a moment. Reyes watched her, feeling the shape of the words more than hearing them. "Why break cover now?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "A man came into my ER with 20 bullet wounds," she said. "No one in that room knew what to do with him. I did. Someone else sent those bullets. Someone else built the system that let them be sure he would not make it to a lawyer. I am tired of being the part of the machine that only gets called when someone is already bleeding." Pens moved. Keys clicked. The cameras in the corners watched without blinking. When she finished speaking, the air in the room felt denser, as if it had to redistribute itself around new information. No verdict came, no gavel, just a quiet understanding that nothing would go back to the way it had been written in the memos. Outside, the sky over the city was beginning to clear. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets clean for a brief moment before the day's traffic claimed them again. Weeks passed before the headlines forgot her name. They shifted the way they always did, from one story to the next, from scandal to storm. The news anchors stopped saying Miracle Nurse quite so often. Talking heads moved on to other programs and other acronyms. Inside Lakeview General, nothing really changed at the pace of the news cycle. Beds still filled, monitors still beeped, The coffee still tasted burned by 3 in the morning. On a Tuesday that could have been any day, the south hallway of the ER gained a new frame on its wall. The maintenance guy who hung it did not know the story. He just followed the work order and used the level to get it straight. When he stepped back, he saw under the glass a torn piece of desert camo sleeve, its edges singed, mounted on a field of white. Next to it hung a gold ring cleaned and polished, suspended on a small hook. Under both, printed in simple black type, was a line, "For those who choose life before paperwork. Lakeview Emergency Department." He shrugged like the way it looked and walked away. People started pausing there without realizing why. Nurses on their way in for shift change slowed just enough to let their eyes track the words. Family members waiting for news wandered toward it and stood for a moment, reading hands deep in their pockets. A janitor pushing a mop lingered, lips moving as he read the line twice. The frame did not explain itself. It did not mention a name. Riley saw it for the first time at the end of a long day in which nothing spectacular had happened. Her hair was pulled up. Her scrubs carried the harmless stains of saline and coffee, not blood. She stopped walking a few steps before she reached it. Her hand touched the wall lightly for balance, fingers brushing against cool paint. The sleeve was Ethan's. She knew it by the pattern of wear at the cuff. The ring, which had spent years hanging under her shirt, looked different under glass. Lighter, as if the metal had been relieved of a weight she had asked it to carry alone. Her throat tightened. She swallowed it down. "Blake put that together," the charge nurse said from behind her. "He is sentimental when no one is looking." Riley did not turn. "He got the rank wrong," she said quietly. "He said if you wanted corrections you could file a complaint in triplicate," the nurse replied. "You know how much he loves forms." A small sound that was almost a laugh escaped Riley before she could stop it. "When did it go up?" she asked. "This morning," the nurse said. "Board approved it after your little field trip downtown. Some folks figured this place could use something on the wall that was not an inspection certificate." They stood together in silence for a few heartbeats. "You do not have to stay, you know," the nurse said. "After everything. People would understand if you wanted a quieter job, urgent care, pediatrics. Somewhere without federal agents at the door every other week." Riley watched the light from the overhead fixtures catch on the ring. "I know," she said. The nurse nodded and left her there alone with the glass and the part of her life she had stopped trying to pretend did not exist. Later in the hospital cafeteria, Logan sat with his back to the window, a tray in front of him that held more untouched food than eaten. His arm was out of the sling now, scars tracing faint paths across skin that had been replanted and persuaded to stay. He looked up when Riley walked in. The blue visitor band on his wrist looked out of place against his posture. There was nothing tentative about the way he occupied the chair. "You look less like roadkill," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I aim to impress," he said. "Doctor says I might actually do push-ups again. Eventually." He sounded personally offended. "That is what happens when you prove people wrong," she said. He poked at a piece of hospital chicken with his fork. "Heard they let you keep your badge," he said. "Big talk in the hallways. Something about committees realizing you are more useful inside the building than on a witness stand in another state." She shrugged. "They offered options," she said. "Protection in a place with a new name. Teaching position in a hospital that does not know how to spell trauma. Or what I already have. Paperwork to make it official this time." "And you chose the one with fluorescent lights and no windows," he said. "It has windows," she said. "They are just small." He studied her for a moment. "You could have chosen to vanish," he said. "You have practice." She took a sip of coffee, considered the taste, and decided not to complain, not today. "I am tired of being a rumor," she said. "If I'm going to stay alive, I would rather people see me doing something with that fact." He nodded slowly. "You know they did not kill Tiaru completely," he said. "They cut lines, closed doors. Some of it will crawl back under a different name. It always does." "I know," she said. "But some doors are locked now that used to be wide open. Some contracts are on someone's desk with red pen across them. That is more friction than they had. So you keep people breathing here," he said, "and hope the suits remember that someone is watching." "Something like that," she said. He set his fork down. "Thank you," he said. "We already had this conversation," she replied. "You are alive. That is the thank you. This is for something else," he said. "For not letting them define what you are good at. Makes it easier for the rest of us to try." She looked at him. Really looked, taking in the lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his shoulders no longer braced for imaginary impacts. He was not whole. No one came back from 20 bullet wounds whole, but he was here solid in a cafeteria that smelled like reheated soup. "Eat your food, Price," she said. "You get lightheaded and pass out in my ER again. I am going to be disappointed." "Yes, Sergeant," he said. Her lips twitched. "Wrong job," she said. "Old habits," he replied. Outside the hospital, traffic flowed as usual. A bus pulled up, took on more lives, and moved again. The elevated train rumbled in the distance. The city kept pushing forward. In an office downtown, Reyes stood at his own window watching a sliver of that city. Files sat in orderly stacks on his desk. Some stamped closed, others marked for further review. Somewhere in the building, lawyers were writing language that would mean less on paper than it sounded in meetings. Cho dropped a fresh report on his desk. Graybridge lost 3 contracts, she said. Defense is pretending it was about performance. Nobody believes them, but no one is saying otherwise. And true, he asked. Shut down, she said. On record. Off record, nobody will answer my calls, which means they are at least aware someone is listening. That is more than we had. He picked up the report, then set it down again. We still have work, he said. We always will, she replied. Her gaze tracked to a photograph clipped to the edge of his corkboard. It was not official. Someone had printed it off a news site and tacked it there as a joke. It showed the entrance to Lakeview's ER doors at dawn, the glass smeared from a recent rain sirens reflecting in the surface. If you looked closely, you could see a figure in scrubs just inside, blurred by motion, turning toward incoming stretchers. Cho tapped the corner of the photo. You going to tell her about the oversight committee, she asked. They want her testimony again when this goes to a more permanent panel. She already gave us more than we deserved, he said. She knows how to find me if she wants to stand in another room with men in suits. And if she does not, Cho said. Then she does not, he said. She has paid enough. At Lakeview, the evening shift rolled in like a tide. Nurses changed places with minimal words, passing on patients with quick reports and shorthand that only made sense if you lived inside it. Riley sat in the small office off the ER, a stack of forms in front of her. The HR representative across from her wore a cardigan and the expression of someone who had been surprised into liking a person she had only known from files. Sign here, the rep said. Reinstatement in full, backdated to the day you were officially put on leave, which is technically different from the day you kept 9 people from dying, but I do not write the labels. Riley read the form, though she already knew what it said. Her name was spelled correctly. The position matched the badge on her scrub top. No aliases, no gaps. She signed. The pen felt heavier than it was. Welcome back, Ms. Morgan, the rep said, then corrected herself. Ms. Hayes. Or whichever you prefer, we can change the file. Riley thought of the sleeve on the wall, the ring the years she had spent splitting herself in half. Keep both, she said. The system can handle it. The rep smiled. The system can handle a lot when it has to, she said. The intercom crackled to life overhead, cutting through the quiet. Code trauma, adult, ETA 5 minutes. The rep glanced toward the door. I will get out of your way, she said. Riley stepped back into the main ER. The lights felt brighter. The air had that charged feel it always got before something came in from the dark. She walked past the framed sleeve. Her fingers brushed the edge of the glass and passing a quick, unconscious touch like a habit she had just decided to keep. At the nurse's station, the charge nurse was already handing out rolls. Bay 3, she said. Morgan, you are point. Blake is on his way down. Radiology is on standby. Let us make this look like we do it every day. We do, someone said. Riley pulled on a fresh pair of gloves. The snap around her wrists was both familiar and new. Her heart rate picked up in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The feeling was closer to alignment. The sense that for once, all the different versions of herself she had tried to live with were standing in the same place. Through the automatic doors, she could see the blur of red and blue lights swinging closer. The faint rumble of an engine reached her, carried along the polished floor. She took her place at the head of Bay 3, beside the empty bed, watching the doors. Somewhere in the part of her mind that still talked to the dead, she thought of Ethan, of sand and heat and the sound mortars made when they tore the sky. Her fingertips touched the ring under her scrub top just once. We are good, she said under her breath. I am home. The gurney burst through the doors. Voices rose. The monitors waited. Riley stepped forward into the flood of movement, her hands already reaching, ready to keep another heart from stopping. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.